hand raised in anger, a trembling mother, a 9-year-old girl who refused to let hate win. What happened on Flight 278 wasn't just about a slap that never landed, it was about dignity, courage, and a truth so powerful it changed an entire industry. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end of this story. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Angela and Laya's story travels across the world. Boarding passes, please. The gate agent's smile was practiced professional. Angela Morris handed over 2 tickets with shaking hands. Her daughter Laya, 9 years old, purple hoodie backpack covered in patches from places her father would never take her again, squeezed her mother's elbow. "You're doing great, Mom," Laya whispered. Angela wasn't doing great. She was drowning. Standing at gate 12 holding first-class tickets to San Diego, forcing herself to breathe through the panic clawing up her throat. The same airline, the same route, the same sky that had swallowed her husband whole 3 years ago. James Morris, Free 3, co-founder of Pacific Skyways, dead in a crash returning from Dallas. And Angela had promised him the night before he left, their last night together, tangled in sheets and whispered promises that one day she'd fly again. "Not because you're scared, Angie, because you remember how much we loved being up there." Well, she was here, terrified, stuttering worse than she had in months. But here. They walked down the jetway. Angela's breathing came in short gasps. The smell hit her first jet fuel recycled air coffee brewing somewhere in the galley. Her stomach turned. "Count with me," Laya said, gripping her hand. 1, 2, 3. James used to do that, taught Laya before he died. Now his daughter was raising his wife. They stepped onto the plane. Row 3, seats A and B, window and middle, first class. Angela wore jeans and a cardigan that had seen better years. No jewelry except her wedding ring. She didn't look like money because she didn't want to be seen at all. Laya slid into the middle seat, already pulling out her coloring book, the one with half-finished pictures of airplanes her father had helped her draw. The plane filled quickly, a businessman in a suit, a woman with perfectly styled hair and a Hermes bag, a man in a cowboy hat who smelled like expensive cologne in Texas. Then she appeared. Denise Crawford, senior flight attendant, 51, 22 years with Pacific Skyways. Hair yanked back so tight it pulled at her temples. Lips pressed into a line that hadn't smiled genuinely in years. She moved through first class like she owned it because, in a way, she did. This was her domain. Her 22 years of being passed over for promotion, watching younger attendants get management positions while she stayed in the sky, had turned her from service-oriented to surveillance-oriented. She stopped at row 3. Her eyes landed on Angela. Then Laya, back to Angela. Something shifted in her expression. "Boarding passes." Not a question, a demand. Angela fumbled through her purse. "Oh, yes, sorry." The stutter made Denise's eyebrow arch. Angela handed them over her face, already flushing red. Denise scanned them slowly, too slowly, like she was looking for fraud written in invisible ink. "First class," Denise said flatly. Yes. Full price or upgraded?" Angela's throat tightened. Full price." Laya's crayon stopped moving. Denise handed the passes back with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Just verifying. We've had issues with people gaming the system lately." Her eyes flicked to Angela's cardigan, her worn sneakers. "Enjoy your flight?" She walked away. Angela's hands trembled in her lap. "Mom?" Laya's voice was quiet. "I'm okay, baby." She wasn't okay. And across the aisle, the woman with the Hermes bag had noticed. She leaned toward her husband, whispering behind her hand. Angela caught 2 words. "Probably points." Her chest tightened. The plane suddenly felt smaller. Denise reappeared 5 minutes later with a tray of champagne. She stopped at row 4, the cowboy hat man, and smiled warmly. "Champagne, sir." "Don't mind if I do." He took a glass, winked. Denise moved to the Hermes woman. "Champagne." "Please?" She skipped row 3 entirely, walked right past Angela and Laya like they were empty seats. Laya looked up. "Excuse me." Denise turned her smile already thinning. "Yes, sweetie. Can my mom have some water? She doesn't feel well." Denise's eyes flicked to Angela, taking in her pale face, her white knuckles gripping the armrest. "We'll have beverages after takeoff." "But you just gave them champagne." Silence dropped like a stone. Denise's jaw tightened. "That's different." "How?" Laya's voice wasn't disrespectful, just honest, confused. The cowboy hat man glanced over. "Laya?" Angela whispered, her voice cracking. Don't..." But Denise leaned down, her voice dropping to syrup laced with venom. "Honey, I'm very busy. Your mother can wait like everyone else in coach." She caught herself. "I mean everyone else." The Hermes woman was watching now. So was her husband. Laya set down her crayon carefully. When she spoke, her voice was steady, calm, the way James used to sound when he was dead serious. "My mom isn't everyone else. She's scared. She lost someone on a plane like this, and you're being mean to her." The air in first class crystallized. Denise straightened like she'd been slapped, her face flushed deep red. "Excuse me. You're being mean," Laya repeated. "You checked our tickets twice. You skipped us for drinks. You keep looking at us like we did something wrong." "Laya, stop," Angela pleaded, tears already forming. "It's fine. It's not fine, Mom." Laya turned back to Denise. "We paid for these seats. We have every right to be here." Denise's hands clenched into fists. Her voice came out strangled. "Maybe if your mother taught you some manners." "My mother," Laya interrupted, "has more manners than you'll ever have." The cowboy hat man stood up. "All right, that's enough." Everyone turned. He was tall, 6'2" easy, with a weathered face that had seen both kindness and consequence. "Ma'am," he said to Denise, his Texas drawl slow and deliberate, "I've been sitting here watching you treat this woman and her little girl like they're criminals. What exactly did they do wrong?" Denise's mouth opened, closed. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "Your job is hospitality," he said, "not interrogation." The woman with the Hermes bag pulled out her phone, started recording. Denise saw it. Her eyes went wide, then wild. "You can't, that's not—" "I can," the woman said calmly. "And I am, because I've been watching too, and this is disgusting." Other passengers were turning now, phones coming out, whispers spreading through the cabin like wildfire. Denise was cornered, humiliated, and humiliation turned some people apologetic. It turned Denise vicious. "You people," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage, "think you can just show up anywhere and demand respect." "Say that again," the cowboy hat man said, his voice dropping to ice. "You people," Denise repeated louder, "don't belong in first class. You don't dress like it. You don't act like it. And you sure as hell don't—" Her hand rose. Not to hit. Not yet. But it lifted toward Angela, a sharp, threatening gesture meant to intimidate, to silence, to put this stuttering woman back in her place. Angela flinched, throwing her arms over her face. And Laya exploded. She shot out of her seat so fast her coloring book flew into the aisle. She planted herself between her mother and Denise, her small body shaking with fury and terror. "Don't you dare!" Her voice cracked across first class like thunder. "Don't you dare touch my mom!" The entire cabin went dead silent. 7 phones were recording now. The cowboy hat man moved closer, ready to intervene. The Hermes woman's mouth hung open. Denise's hand dropped, her face drained of color. "I wasn't going to. I didn't—" "Yes, you were," Laya screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You were going to hurt her because you think we don't belong here, because we don't look rich enough, because my mom stutters, and you think that makes her less than you." "Laya," Angela sobbed, reaching for her daughter, but Laya wasn't done. "My mom paid for these tickets." Her voice was breaking now, raw with pain. "She saved for a year. She hasn't flown since my dad died because she's been too scared. And you made her feel like garbage. You made her feel like she doesn't deserve to be here." "Your father," Denise started, her voice faltering. Laya's next words came out in a whisper that somehow carried through the entire cabin. "My father built this airline, and you would have known who we were if you'd just been kind." The silence that followed was deafening. Denise's face went white as bone. "What?" Heavy footsteps pounded down the aisle. The captain, tall, gray-haired, 40 years of flying, etched into the lines around his eyes, appeared with the senior flight attendant right behind him. "What the hell is happening on my plane?" His voice was commanding, but controlled. The cowboy hat man spoke first. "Your flight attendant just threatened a passenger, a widow flying for the first time since her husband died, in front of her 9-year-old daughter." "That's not—" Denise stammered. "We have it on video," the Hermes woman said, holding up her phone. "All of it." The captain's expression turned to stone. He looked at Angela, curled in her seat, sobbing. At Laya, still standing guard over her mother, fists clenched. At Denise, whose career was imploding in real time. "Maria," he said to the senior attendant, "take over here." Maria stepped forward. Her name tag glinted under the cabin lights. When she saw Angela's face, recognition flooded her features. "Oh my God," Maria breathed. "Mrs. Morris?" Angela looked up through her tears, confused. Maria knelt beside row 3, her own eyes filling. I knew your husband. James trained me when I started here 15 years ago. He was... Her voice broke. He was the kindest man I ever worked with. Laya's lip trembled. You knew my dad. I did, sweetheart. Maria reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Laya's shoulder. And he would be so incredibly proud of you right now. Laya collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. The captain turned to Denise. His voice was quiet. Final. Off the plane, now. Captain, please, I have 22 years. And you just threw them away. Off, now. Denise's face crumpled. She grabbed her bag from the galley with shaking hands and walked off the plane. No one spoke. No one looked at her. She was already a ghost. Maria took over first class. She brought Angela water and a warm blanket. She sat with them until Angela's breathing steadied. When the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Maria held Angela's hand during takeoff. The cowboy hat man leaned across the aisle. Name's Robert, by the way, and your daughter's got a hell of a spine. Angela managed a watery smile. She gets it from her father. I don't know who... Robert said, glancing at Laya, who had finally gone back to coloring. I think she gets it from both of you. The flight to San Diego took 2 hours. Angela held Laya's hand the entire time. When they hit turbulence, Laya counted for her. 1, 2, 3. Just like James taught her. When they landed, Maria walked them off personally. She hugged Angela at the gate. I'm sending this up the chain, Maria said quietly. What happened to you, what that little girl did, people need to know. The Hermes woman approached before they left. I sent the video to the airline and to a few journalist friends. I hope that's okay. Angela nodded, too exhausted to speak. By the time they reached baggage claim, Laya's purple hoodie had a coffee stain and Angela's cardigan was wrinkled from being clutched too hard. They didn't look like heroes. They didn't look like survivors. They just looked like a mother and daughter who'd made it through. But that night, as Angela tucked Laya into their hotel bed and kissed her forehead, her daughter whispered something that would haunt her in the best possible way. Mom, do you think Dad saw what I did? Angela's throat closed. She smoothed Laya's hair, still damp from the shower. Baby, I know he did. Laya smiled, closed her eyes. Good, because I want him to know I kept my promise. I took care of you. Angela waited until Laya was asleep before she let herself cry. Not from fear this time, not from humiliation, from something else entirely, because 3,000 miles away, 7 videos of what happened on Flight 278 were already spreading across the internet, and by morning the entire world would know the name Angela Morris. But more importantly, they'd know the name Laya, and what came next would shake Pacific Skyways to its foundation. Angela woke to her phone vibrating like it was having a seizure. 3:17 in the morning. The hotel room was dark except for the glow of the screen lighting up her face. 47 missed calls. 219 text messages. Her voicemail was full. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake Laya sleeping beside her. Her hands shook as she unlocked the phone. The first text was from her sister. Oh my God, Angela, turn on the news. The second was from a number she didn't recognize. TMZ here looking to interview you about Flight 278. The third made her stomach drop. This is Rebecca Chen from CBS News. We'd like to discuss what happened yesterday. Yesterday. Had it only been yesterday, Angela's fingers moved without thinking opening Twitter. And there it was, the video, posted by the woman with the Hermes bag. Caption, this flight attendant tried to intimidate a widowed mother on Pacific Skyways Flight 278. Her 9-year-old daughter stopped her. This is what courage looks like. 4 million views in 8 hours. Angela's breath caught. She pressed play. There she was, small on the phone screen, curled in her seat, crying while Denise's hand rose. And there was Laya, tiny, fierce, furious, launching herself between them like a human shield. Don't you dare touch my mom. The audio was crystal clear. Every word, every sob, every passenger's shocked gasp. And then Laya's final declaration, the one that was currently being quoted in think pieces across the internet. My father built this airline, and you would have known who we were if you'd just been kind. Angela's hand covered her mouth. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands. This little girl is braver than most adults. Fire that flight attendant immediately. I'm crying. This is what happens when children have to protect their parents from racism and classism. Angela Morris deserves better. Her daughter deserves better. We all deserve better. Angela scrolled until her eyes burned. News articles, opinion pieces, a hashtag justice for Angela, another hashtag Laya the hero. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She declined it. It rang again. Different number. Declined. Again. 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 Mom? Laya was awake, squinting at her thumb in the darkness. Why's your phone doing that? Angela turned it off completely. It's nothing, baby. Go back to sleep. But Laya sat up, rubbing her eyes. Is it about yesterday? Angela couldn't lie. Yes. Are we in trouble? No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble. Laya studied her mother's face with those two old eyes. Then why do you look scared? Because Angela was scared. Terrified. The video was everywhere, which meant they were everywhere. Their faces, their story, their grief on display for millions of strangers to dissect and judge and turn into whatever narrative fit their worldview. But she couldn't tell Laya that. I'm not scared, Angela lied, pulling her daughter close. I'm just surprised, that's all. They fell back asleep, eventually wrapped around each other the way they'd slept every night since James died. But when Angela's eyes closed, all she saw was Denise's raised hand and Laya's small body standing between them. Morning came too fast. Angela turned her phone back on and immediately regretted it. 342 missed calls now. Her email was flooded. Someone had found her Facebook and Instagram, both private, thank God, but the friend requests numbered in the thousands. We need to leave, Angela said, already throwing clothes into their suitcase. Now. Leave. But we just got here. You said we were staying for 3 days. You said we were going to the beach where Dad proposed. Angela's hands froze on a folded shirt. She had said that. That was the whole point of this trip, to face the fear of flying, so they could visit the place where James had gotten down on one knee in the sand and asked her to build a life with him. I know, baby, but someone knocked on the door. Angela and Laya both jumped. Another knock, harder. Mrs. Morris, this is hotel security. You have members of the press in the lobby asking for you. Press. Oh, God. We're not available, Angela called through the door, her voice shaking. Understood. We can escort you out through the service entrance if you'd like. They packed in 5 minutes. Laya didn't complain, didn't ask questions. She just moved with the efficiency of a child who'd learned too young that sometimes the world comes at you fast and you have to run. Hotel security, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, led them through the kitchen, past confused line cooks and a dishwasher who did a double take when she saw them. They exited into an alley that smelled like grease and yesterday's garbage. There's a car waiting, Patricia said. It'll take you wherever you need to go. I didn't call a car, Angela said. I know. Patricia handed her a business card. Someone else did. Angela looked down at the card. Embossed lettering. Pacific Skyways. And a name that made her knees weak. David Morris, Chief Executive Officer, James's brother. The car was a black SUV with tinted windows. The driver said nothing, just held the door open while they climbed in. As they pulled away from the hotel, Angela saw them reporters with cameras clustered at the front entrance like vultures. Where are we going? Laya asked. Angela stared at the business card. To see your uncle. David Morris hadn't spoken to Angela in 2 years. Not since the funeral, when he'd stood at the podium and delivered a eulogy about his brother that was all business accomplishments and zero heart. When he'd shaken Angela's hand afterward and said James would want you to be taken care of, like she was a liability to manage instead of his brother's wife. She'd hated him for that. Still did, maybe, but he was calling now. And given that his airline was currently trending worldwide for all the wrong reasons, she understood why. The SUV pulled up to a building downtown, glass and steel, modern and cold. The Pacific Skyways logo dominated the entrance. Mrs. Morris, the driver said, speaking for the first time. Mr. Morris is expecting you on the 20th floor. They rode the elevator in silence. Laya held Angela's hand, her purple hoodie still stained with yesterday's coffee. Angela's cardigan was wrinkled. They looked exactly like what they were: exhausted, overwhelmed, out of their depth. The elevator opened directly into an executive suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Diego. Leather furniture. Art that probably cost more than Angela's car. And there, standing with his back to them, staring out at the city, was David. He turned when he heard them enter. 50 years old. Salt and pepper hair styled within an inch of its life. Suit that cost 4 figures easily. He had James's eyes, but none of his warmth. Angela. His voice was careful, controlled. David? His gaze dropped to Laya. Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or guilt. You've gotten so big, Laya. Laya said nothing, just pressed closer to her mother. David cleared his throat. Please, sit. Angela didn't move. Why are we here, David? Because you're viral, he said bluntly. 7 videos, 23 million views combined as of an hour ago. Every news outlet in the country is calling. The airline stock dropped 4% at opening bell this morning. I'm sorry, Angela said, her voice cold. I didn't realize getting humiliated on your airline would be such an inconvenience. David flinched. That's not, I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? He moved to his desk, pulled out a tablet, and handed it to her. This is what I meant. Angela looked down. The screen showed a news article. The headline read, Pacific Skyways flight attendant fired after viral video shows her threatening founder's widow and daughter. Founder's widow. That's what she was now. Not Angela, not James's wife, just a label, a headline. Denise Crawford is terminated effective immediately, David continued. We've launched a full investigation into the incident. We're implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, and we're issuing a public apology. He paused. To you. Angela looked up. I don't want an apology. What do you want? She stood slowly, handing him back the tablet. I want to know how someone like Denise Crawford worked for your airline for 22 years. I want to know how many other passengers she treated like that. I want to know why nobody stopped her before now. David's jaw tightened. It's complicated. No, Laya said, suddenly, her voice small but clear. It's not. Both adults turned to look at her. Laya stepped forward, her hands balled into fists at her sides. It's not complicated. She was mean because she thought she could be. Because nobody ever told her she couldn't. Because people like my mom, people who are scared or different or don't look rich, get treated like they don't matter. Her voice cracked. And my dad would have hated that. David's face went pale. Laya, my dad built this airline because he wanted everyone to feel safe in the sky. Laya continued, tears streaming now. He told me that, before he died. He said flying should make people feel free. She looked up at David with red-rimmed eyes. Do you think my mom felt free yesterday? The silence in that office was suffocating. David sank into his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. No, she didn't. And I'm sorry, Laya. I'm so sorry. Angela pulled her daughter close. We should go. Wait. David stood abruptly. Please, just wait. He moved to the window, hands shoved in his pockets. For a long moment, he just stared out at the city. James called me the night before he died. David said quietly. Did you know that Angela's breath caught? No. He said he'd been thinking about the company, about what it had become. He said we'd lost sight of why we started it in the first place. David's voice was barely above a whisper. He said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to promise I'd fix it. Make it about people again, not profits. He turned to face them. His eyes were wet. I didn't listen. After he died, I buried myself in spreadsheets and board meetings and stock prices. I told myself that's what he would have wanted, keeping the company stable. But the truth is, I just didn't want to feel what I was feeling. Losing him destroyed me. He looked at Angela. And I shut you out because looking at you reminded me of everything I'd lost. Angela's throat closed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, David continued. I don't deserve it, but I am asking for a chance to make this right, to honor James the way I should have from the beginning. How? Angela's voice was hoarse. David picked up his phone, pressed a button. His assistant appeared in the doorway. Get me legal PR in the board, he said. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. The assistant's eyes widened. Sir, the board is scattered across. I don't care if they're in Timbuktu. Get them on video conference. This can't wait. The assistant disappeared. David turned back to Angela and Laya. I'm creating a foundation, the James Morris Dignity Initiative. It's going to completely overhaul how we train our staff, not just at Pacific Skyways, but industry-wide if I can manage it. Anti-bias training, accessibility awareness, de-escalation tactics, everything. He paused. And I want you to help me build it. Angela stared at him. What? You and Laya, you're the faces of this. Your story is what opened everyone's eyes. I need you to help me make sure this never happens to anyone else. David, I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone. He crouched down to Laya's level. And you, kiddo. You stood up when adults stayed silent. You protected your mom when the system failed her. That's exactly the kind of courage we need leading this. Laya looked up at her mother. Mom. Angela's mind was spinning. A foundation. In James's name. A chance to turn their pain into something meaningful. but also more cameras, more interviews, more strangers dissecting their lives. "I need to think about it," Angela said. David nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need." He handed her another business card. "My personal cell. Call me whenever you're ready." They left the building the same way they'd entered, escorted, protected, hidden. But this time, as the SUV pulled away, Angela looked back at the Pacific Skyways building. James had built that. His hands, his vision, his dream of making the sky accessible to everyone. And yesterday that dream had failed. Failed her. Failed Laya. But maybe, just maybe, they could fix it. "Mom," Laya's voice broke through her thoughts. "Can we still go to the beach? Where Dad proposed?" Angela pulled her daughter close. "Yes, baby, we can go." They spent the afternoon at La Jolla Cove, the same stretch of sand where James had gotten down on one knee 13 years ago with a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy, where he'd said, "Marry me, Angie, let's build something beautiful." They'd built Laya and a life. And then he'd died, and Angela had spent 3 years trying to remember how to breathe. But today, watching her daughter chase seagulls with her shoes in her hand and her purple hoodie flapping in the wind. Angela felt something shift. Laya ran back to her breathless and sandy. "Mom, look," she held out a perfect white shell. "Do you think Dad sent it?" Angela's eyes filled. "I know he did." That evening, back at a different hotel one David's assistant had booked under a fake name, to avoid the press, Angela finally checked her phone again. The video had 31 million views now. The hashtag #JusticeForAngela was trending number 2 worldwide. News anchors were debating bias in the airline industry. Think pieces were being written. Denise Crawford's name was being dragged through the mud. But there was something else. An email from Maria, the senior flight attendant from Flight 278. Subject line, "You need to see this." Angela opened it. Inside was a link to a video. She pressed play. It was a recording from someone's phone, shaky vertical, barely audible. But the setting was clear in airport terminal, and the person speaking was Denise Crawford. She sat alone at a gate, her face blotchy from crying. She was talking to someone off camera, another employee maybe. "I know I messed up," Denise said, her voice raw. "I know, but nobody's asking why. Nobody's asking what it's like to work 22 years for a company and watch them hire pretty young things straight out of college for management while you're stuck serving drinks at 51 years old." She wiped her eyes. "I wasn't trying to hurt that woman. I wasn't. I'm so tired. So tired of feeling invisible." The video cut off. Angela stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't forgive Denise. What happened was inexcusable. But for the first time, she saw her as something other than a villain. She saw her as a woman who'd been ground down by a system that didn't value her, who'd lashed out at the wrong person because she couldn't lash out at the structure that had failed her. Angela forwarded the video to David with one sentence. "The problem is bigger than one person." He replied 3 minutes later, "I know, that's why I need your help." That night, after Laya fell asleep clutching the white shell from the beach, Angela sat on the hotel balcony and called David's personal number. He answered on the first ring. "Angela." "I'll do it," she said. "The foundation, the initiative, all of it." She could hear his exhale of relief. "Thank you." But not because of the airline, not because of the publicity. Angela's voice hardened. Because Laya deserves to grow up in a world where she doesn't have to protect her mother from people who should know better. Because James deserves to have his name attached to something that actually matters. "Agreed," David said quietly. "And one more thing. Anything." Angela gripped the balcony railing. "Denise Crawford gets help, counseling, whatever she needs. She doesn't get to be the scapegoat for a system that created her." Silence. "David, that's very generous, Angela." "It's not generous, it's necessary." Angela looked out at the dark ocean. Hurt people hurt people. If we don't address the root cause, this will just keep happening." "You sound like James," David said, his voice thick. Angela's eyes filled. "I'm trying to." They talked for another hour, sketching out plans. By the time Angela hung up, she was exhausted but lighter somehow, like she'd finally found a way to carry the weight she'd been dragging for 3 years. She didn't know that by morning, the second video, Denise's breakdown, would leak, that Twitter would explode with debates about accountability versus empathy, that news anchors would argue about whether Denise deserved sympathy or condemnation. She didn't know that Laya's face would end up on the cover of Time magazine with the caption, "The Girl Who Changed the Sky." She didn't know that 6 months from now, the James Morris Dignity Initiative would be implemented across 17 airlines worldwide. All she knew sitting on that balcony at midnight was that something had shifted. In her. In Laya. In the world that had watched a 9-year-old girl stand between her mother and hate. Dignity isn't earned, James used to say. It's something you're born with. And maybe, just maybe, Angela was finally starting to believe him. The morning Angela and Laya were supposed to fly home, CNN was camped outside their hotel. Angela saw them through the lobby window, 3 news vans, reporters with perfect hair and microphones, cameras pointed at the entrance like weapons. Her stomach dropped. "We can't go out there," she said to Patricia, the hotel security guard who'd become their unofficial protector over the past 3 days. "You don't have to." Patricia handed her a key card. "Service entrance, same as before, your car's waiting." But Laya was staring out the window, her face pressed against the glass. "Mom, there's so many people." "I know, baby, that's why we're leaving the back way. But they want to talk to us. They want a story, Laya, that's different." Laya turned to look at her mother. "What if our story could help someone?" Angela's breath caught. 9 years old. 9, and already wiser than Angela would ever be. "Sweetheart, those people don't care about helping anyone. They care about ratings." "How do you know?" Laya's eyes were serious. "Dad always said you can't judge people before you meet them." Angela wanted to argue, wanted to grab her daughter's hand and run out the back door and disappear into anonymity again. But Laya was right. James had said that. Usually while Angela was mid-rant about something trying to make her laugh, trying to make her see the world the way he did, full of possibility instead of threat. "Okay," Angela heard herself say. "Okay, we'll talk to them." Patricia's eyes widened. "Mrs. Morris, I really don't think—" "Just one reporter," Angela said. "We choose which one, and it happens here in the lobby where you can supervise. 5 minutes. That's it." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded. "I'll set it up." 20 minutes later, Angela and Laya sat on a couch in the hotel lobby across from a reporter named Marcus Chen. Mid-30s kind eyes, a recorder between them instead of a camera crew. "Thank you for doing this, Schleck," Marcus said. "I know this week has been overwhelming." "That's putting it mildly," Angela said. Her hands were shaking. She tucked them under her legs. Marcus looked at Laya. "How are you doing with all of this?" Laya shrugged. "I don't really understand it. I just did what anyone would do. I protected my mom." "Not everyone would do that," Marcus said gently. "That's why your story matters." "But why?" Laya's voice rose slightly. "Why does it matter that I stood up for my mom? Shouldn't that just be normal? Shouldn't people just be kind to each other without needing a reason?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Yes, they should, but they're not always, and sometimes it takes someone like you to remind them." Angela's throat tightened. She reached for Laya's hand. "Mrs. Morris," Marcus continued, "there's been a lot of speculation online about what happened on that flight, about whether this was about race class or just one bad employee. What do you think?" Angela was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, despite the stutter trying to claw its way up. "I think it was about all of those things, and none of them." She looked at Marcus. "Denise Crawford looked at me and made assumptions about who I was, what I deserved, whether I belonged, and those assumptions were based on the way I looked, the way I spoke, the clothes I wore." She paused. "But here's the thing, Denise isn't unique. She's just the one who got caught." "You think this happens often?" "I know it does. To me, to people who look like me, to anyone who doesn't fit someone's idea of what belongs looks like." Angela's voice cracked. "The difference is this time someone recorded it. This time it went viral. This time people cared." "And what do you want to happen now?" Angela looked at Laya, then back at Marcus. "I want the system to change, not just fire one person and call it justice. I want airlines, all of them, to look hard at how they train their employees, how they treat passengers, how they value dignity." She took a breath. "And I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she doesn't have to be brave, where kindness is the default, not the exception." Marcus nodded slowly. "David Morris announced the James Morris Dignity Initiative yesterday. You're involved with that too." "We are," Angela said. "James, my husband, he believed flying should be about freedom, about bringing people together, not dividing them. This foundation is our way of making sure his dream doesn't die with him." "What would you say to Denise Crawford if she was here right now?" The question hung in the air. Laya looked up at her mother, waiting. Angela closed her eyes. Thought about the video she'd seen Denise crying in that terminal, broken and exhausted. Thought about 22 years of being overlooked. Thought about her own pain, her own breaking points, the moments when she'd lashed out at the world because the grief was too heavy to carry alone. "I'd say I'm sorry," Angela said quietly. Marcus blinked. You're sorry. I'm sorry that the system failed her, too. I'm sorry she spent 2 decades being treated as disposable. I'm sorry that hurt people hurt people. Angela opened her eyes. But I'd also tell her that none of that excuses what she did, that her pain doesn't give her the right to inflict pain on others, and that if she wants to heal, she needs to start by taking accountability. Laya squeezed her mother's hand. The interview ended exactly 5 minutes later. Marcus thanked them, promised the piece would be fair, and left through the front entrance where his colleagues immediately swarmed him. Angela and Laya slipped out the back. The flight home was nothing like Flight 278. David had upgraded them to first class again, different airline this time, different route, different everything. The moment they boarded, the entire crew knew who they were. The flight attendant who greeted them was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes and a genuine smile. Her name tag read Jessica. Mrs. Morris Laya, welcome aboard. She crouched down to Laya's level. I just want you to know what you did on that flight. You're my hero. Laya's face flushed. I'm not a hero. Yes, you are, Jessica said firmly. You stood up when it mattered. That's the definition of heroism. Throughout the flight, crew members stopped by their seats. Not to gawk, not to take photos, just to quietly say thank you, to tell them their own stories about times they'd witnessed discrimination or bias but stayed silent, to promise they'd do better. By the time they landed, Angela had cried 3 times, and Laya had collected 7 handwritten notes from flight attendants across the country who'd seen the video and been inspired to speak up. But coming home meant facing reality. Their house was exactly as they'd left it, small, cluttered with memories haunted by James's absence. Angela dropped their bags by the door, and Laya immediately ran to her room, needing the comfort of familiar things after a week of chaos. Angela stood in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator covered in Laya's drawings. Most of them were of airplanes. In every single one, there was a stick figure with a halo flying the plane. Her phone rang. David. You're home? He asked. Just walked in. Good. Because we need to talk about next steps. Angela moved to the living room, sank onto the couch. I'm listening. The board approved the foundation, David said. Full funding. We're talking $20 million to start with potential for more if we show results. $20 million. Angela's mind reeled. The plan is to launch in 3 months, David continued. We'll start with Pacific Skyway's complete overhaul of training protocols. Then we'll offer the program to other airlines. I'm already in talks with United Delta Southwest. 3 months, Angela's voice rose. David, that's not enough time. It has to be. The media cycle moves fast. We need to capitalize on the momentum while people still care. This isn't about momentum, Angela said sharply. This is about actually changing things. That takes time. I know, but we also need to strike while the iron's hot. If we wait too long, people will move on. Another story will grab headlines, and all of this will have been for nothing. Angela hated that he was right. So what do you need from me? She asked. Everything. David's voice was serious. I need you to be the face of this initiative. You and Laya, I need you at the launch event. I need you doing interviews, speaking at conferences, meeting with airline executives. I need you to tell your story over and over until the whole industry has no choice but to listen. Angela looked down at her hands rough from years of working as a nurse, scarred from the accident that had caused her stutter trembling from anxiety that never quite went away. I'm not a public speaker, David. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. And Laya. Only as much as she's comfortable with. I won't exploit my niece Angela, but her voice matters, what she did matters, and if she wants to help, I think we should let her. Angela closed her eyes, thought about Laya's words earlier. What if our story could help someone? I'll talk to her. Angela said finally. That's all I ask. That night at dinner, spaghetti. Laya's favorite, Angela broached the subject carefully. Uncle David wants us to help with the foundation, she said, twirling pasta on her fork. It would mean doing some interviews, maybe speaking at events, telling people what happened. Laya was quiet, chewing thoughtfully. Finally, she said, Would it help other kids and their moms? I think so, yes. Then we should do it. Angela set down her fork. Baby, you don't have to decide right now. This is a lot. And once we start, people are going to have opinions about us, about what happened. Some of them won't be nice. People already have opinions, Laya said simply. I saw the comments on the video. Some people think I'm brave. Some people think I'm rude for yelling at an adult. Some people think you played the victim. She looked up at her mother. But none of those people know us. They don't know what we've been through. They don't know Dad. Angela's eyes filled. So if telling our story means even one person treats someone better, then it's worth it, Laya continued. That's what Dad would say. Angela reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. When did you get so wise? Laya smiled. I had a good teacher. The next 3 months were a blur. Angela and Laya became the faces of the James Morris Dignity Initiative. They did interviews with Good Morning America, The Today Show, NPR. They spoke at airline conferences where executives in expensive suits sat in uncomfortable silence while Laya told them exactly what their policies were missing. They worked with consultants, psychologists, diversity experts. They reviewed training materials, sat in on focus groups, listened to hundreds of stories from passengers and employees who'd experienced or witnessed discrimination. And slowly, painfully, the foundation took shape. The training program focused on 3 pillars: recognition, de-escalation, and accountability. Recognition meant teaching employees to identify their own biases before those biases hurt someone. De-escalation meant giving them tools to handle conflicts without intimidation or aggression. Accountability meant creating systems where discrimination couldn't hide in the shadows anymore. But the hardest part wasn't the logistics, it was the people. 6 weeks into the process, Angela got an email from Denise Crawford. Subject line, I'm sorry. Angela stared at it for 20 minutes before opening it. The email was short, direct. Mrs. Morris, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this, but I need you to know that what I did was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I let my own bitterness and exhaustion turn me into someone I don't recognize. Someone my mother wouldn't recognize. I've spent the last 2 months in therapy trying to understand how I got here. Trying to figure out how to be better. I know it doesn't change what happened, but I'm trying. And I want you to know that watching your daughter stand up for you changed something in me. She reminded me that courage isn't about power. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. Thank you for that. Even though I don't deserve your thanks. Denise Crawford. Angela read it 3 times. Then she showed it to Laya. What do you think? Angela asked. Laya read carefully, her lips moving slightly as she processed each word. When she finished, she looked up. I think she means it, Laya said, but meaning it isn't enough. She has to do something with it. Like what? Laya thought for a moment. She should help, with the foundation. She knows what it's like to be treated like you don't matter. She knows how the system breaks people. Maybe she could teach other flight attendants how not to become like she was. Angela stared at her daughter. You want her to be part of this, not want, Laya corrected, but I think it would make the program better. Because people who've never messed up don't understand why other people mess up. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Terrifying, complicated, risky sense. Angela forwarded the email to David with 1 sentence. Laya thinks we should give her a chance. David called immediately. Are you serious? I don't know, Angela admitted. But Laya's right, Denise has insight we don't have. She's lived the experience of being ground down by this industry. If she's genuinely trying to change, maybe her perspective could help others avoid the same path. The optics would be a nightmare, David said. The woman who threatened you now, working for a foundation in your husband's name. Or, Angela countered, the optics could be transformative. Proof that accountability and redemption can coexist. Proof that we're serious about addressing root causes, not just punishing symptoms. David was silent for a long moment. Let me think about it. 2 weeks later, Denise Crawford walked into the Pacific Skyways conference room where Angela, David, and the foundation team were meeting. She looked different. Smaller, somehow. Her hair was down softer, no makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her uniform. She looked human. Angela's heart hammered as Denise sat across from her. Thank you for seeing me, Denise said quietly. Her voice shook. Thank Laya, Angela said. This was her idea. Denise's eyes widened. She wanted me here. She said you could help, that your experience matters. Angela's voice hardened slightly. But if you're here for publicity or redemption or to make yourself feel better, the door's right there. I'm here to help, Denise said. However I can, whatever you need. David leaned forward. We're developing a module about implicit bias and burnout, about how systemic failures create individual cruelty. You willing to be a case study? Denise paled but nodded. Yes. It won't be comfortable, David continued. You'll have to talk about what you did. Why you did it, how you got to that point, on camera, for training purposes. I understand. And there's no guarantee this rehabilitates your reputation, Angela added. People might still hate you. Probably will, honestly. Denise's eyes filled. I hate me too, Mrs. Morris. What I did to you and your daughter, I relive it every day. If I can use that pain to stop someone else from making the same mistakes, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. The room was silent. Finally, Laya, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner coloring while the adults talked, spoke up. My dad used to say everyone deserves a second chance, she said without looking up from her drawing. But you only get one. If you mess this up, you don't get another. Denise turned to look at her tears streaming down her face. I won't mess it up, I promise. Laya finally looked up, met Denise's eyes. Good, because my mom's been hurt enough, and I won't let anyone hurt her again. The weight of those words spoken by a 9-year-old who'd already had to protect her mother from the world settled over everyone like a blanket. Denise nodded, unable to speak. Over the next month, Denise became an unexpected asset to the foundation. She was brutally honest in her interviews, holding nothing back about her own failures and the system that had enabled them. She helped develop training scenarios based on real situations she'd encountered. She reached out to other veteran flight attendants who were struggling with burnout and resentment, creating a support network that hadn't existed before. And slowly, grudgingly, Angela began to see her as something other than the woman who'd tried to hurt her. She saw her as a cautionary tale, a reminder that cruelty is often born from pain, that systems matter more than individuals, that change requires both accountability and compassion, but trust that would take longer. 3 months after Flight 278, the James Morris Dignity Initiative officially launched. The event was held at the Pacific Skyways headquarters. 200 people packed the auditorium. Airline executives, of flight attendants, diversity consultants, journalists, and passengers who'd been affected by discrimination. Angela stood backstage, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her notes. I can't do this, she whispered to David. Yes, you can. I can't even talk without stuttering. How am I supposed to give a speech? David took her hands, steadied them. The stutter doesn't matter, Angela. What matters is what you're saying, and people need to hear it. Laya appeared beside them, dressed in her purple hoodie, the same one from the flight, now washed but still coffee-stained. She'd refused to wear anything else. You ready, Mom? Angela looked down at her daughter, drew strength from her steady gaze. Yeah, baby, I'm ready. They walked on stage together. The applause was deafening. Angela stepped up to the microphone, looked out at 200 faces, saw Denise in the back row crying, saw Maria, the flight attendant from Flight 278 in the front, saw Robert, the cowboy hat man who'd flown in from Texas specifically for this. And she began to speak. 3 months ago, my daughter and I boarded a flight. We were scared, grieving, trying to honor the memory of a man we both loved more than anything. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. What happened on that flight shouldn't have happened, but it did, because systems we trust failed us, because bias is easier than empathy, because somewhere along the way we forgot that every passenger is someone's mother, daughter, father, son. The room was silent. This foundation isn't about punishment, Angela continued. It's about prevention. It's about creating a world where 9-year-olds don't have to protect their parents, where dignity isn't a privilege, it's a guarantee. She looked at Laya standing beside her. My husband believed everyone deserves to feel free in the sky. This is how we make that belief a reality. The applause when she finished shook the building, but it was Laya's speech that broke the internet. She stepped up to the microphone too short, so David adjusted it down and spoke with the clarity of someone who'd seen too much and refused to look away. Adults keep telling me I'm brave, she said, but I don't feel brave. I feel sad that bravery was necessary. I feel angry that my mom was treated like she didn't matter. And I feel scared that without this video, nothing would have changed. Her voice steadied. But mostly I feel hope. Because you're all here. Because you're listening. Because maybe, just maybe, the next time a kid gets on a plane with their scared mom, nobody will make them feel small. She paused. My dad built this airline with his hands and his heart. He's gone now, but his dream isn't. And as long as people like all of you keep fighting for dignity, his dream lives on. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. That night, clips of Laya's speech went viral. Again. 40 million views in 12 hours. News anchors played it on loop. Think pieces declared her the voice of a generation. But Angela wasn't watching the news. She was sitting on Laya's bed, stroking her daughter's hair while she slept, wondering how she'd raise someone so brave. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. 17 airlines just committed to implementing the program. This is really happening, Angela. We're actually changing things. Angela smiled through her tears. Somewhere she thought James was smiling too. 6 months after the launch, Angela stood in a Dallas airport terminal watching a flight attendant help an elderly woman who was struggling with her carry-on. The attendant was patient, kind, taking extra time even though the boarding line was backing up. She didn't rush, she didn't judge, she just helped. When the woman finally made it to her seat, the flight attendant caught Angela watching and smiled. Then she touched the small pin on her uniform, a silver airplane with wings spread wide. The James Morris Dignity Initiative logo. Angela's throat tightened. It was working. Actually working. But not everyone was celebrating. The backlash started quietly at first. A few op-eds questioning whether one viral video justified a complete industry overhaul. Some anonymous complaints on pilot forums about the new training taking too much time. A handful of conservative pundits arguing that the initiative was political correctness run amok. Then it got louder. A passenger filed a lawsuit claiming the new protocols made flight attendants too passive, that his disruptive seatmate hadn't been properly handled because the crew was afraid of seeming biased. The case was frivolous, thrown out within weeks, but the damage was done. News cycles love conflict, and suddenly every story about the initiative came with a qualifier, but critics say Angela tried to ignore it. Focused on the success stories instead, the emails from passengers who'd noticed the difference, the flight attendants who said the training had changed how they saw their jobs, the data showing complaint rates dropping across implementing airlines. But Laya was reading the comments. Angela found her one evening curled up on the couch with her tablet, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, what's wrong?" Laya turned the screen around. It was a news article about the initiative. The comment section was brutal. That kid is being exploited by her money-hungry mother. Nobody would care about this if they weren't related to the founder. Special treatment much? The real victim here is Denise Crawford. She lost her career over one bad day. Angela took the tablet closed. It pulled Laya into her arms. "People are mean online because they can be," Angela said softly. "They don't know us. They don't know what we've been through." But what if they're right? Laya's voice was muffled against Angela's shoulder. What if we are just getting special treatment? What if none of this would have mattered if Dad hadn't founded the airline? Angela pulled back, looked her daughter in the eyes. "You want to know the truth? You're probably right. If your dad hadn't founded Pacific Skyways, the video might have gotten less attention. We might not have had David's resources to build this foundation." She paused. "But that doesn't make what happened to us less real, and it doesn't make this work less important." "Then why does it feel bad?" "Because changing things always feels bad to people who benefit from how things are." Angela smoothed Laya's hair. "Every movement for justice in history has faced backlash. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's working." Laya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I miss Dad." "Me too, baby. Every single day." "Do you think he'd be proud of us?" Angela's eyes filled. "I know he would be." But privately, Angela was starting to crack. The constant travel, the interviews, the scrutiny, it was wearing her down. Her stutter was getting worse again. She'd started having panic attacks before public appearances, hiding in bathrooms to cry and hyperventilate before forcing herself back out with a smile. She was exhausted. Burned out. Running on fumes, and the memory of James telling her she was stronger than she knew. David noticed during a foundation meeting when Angela suddenly stood up mid-sentence and walked out. He found her in the hallway, hands braced against the wall, breathing in sharp gasps. "Angela, I'm fine. Just need a minute." "You're not fine." David's voice was gentle. "Talk to me." "I can't do this anymore." The words came out in a rush. "I can't keep telling the story. I can't keep smiling for cameras. I can't keep pretending I'm not falling apart." David guided her to a chair, sat beside her. "Then stop," he said simply. Angela looked at him through tears. "What?" "Stop doing the interviews. Stop traveling. Stop pushing yourself until you break." He took her hand. "The foundation doesn't need you to destroy yourself, Angela. It needs you whole." "But the launch events, the airline meetings? I'll handle them. We have a team now. You and Laya did the hard part. You got everyone's attention. Now let the professionals implement it." Angela wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. "I feel like I'm letting him down," she whispered. "Like I'm letting James down." David's voice cracked. "James would never want this for you. He'd want you resting, healing, being Laya's mom instead of the world's inspiration. But what about those people who need this? The passengers who are counting on us to finish what we started. The work continues whether you're in front of cameras or not." David squeezed her hand. "You've done more than enough, Angela. Please, let yourself rest." That night, Angela and Laya had the conversation she'd been dreading. "I think we need to step back from the foundation for a while," Angela said over dinner, takeout Chinese, both of them too tired to cook. Laya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Why? Because we're tired, baby. Because this has taken over our lives. Because I miss just being your mom instead of Angela Morris, the face of airline dignity. But people are counting on us." "I know, but we can't help anyone if we fall apart." Angela reached across the table. "The foundation will keep going. The work will continue. We just won't be the ones doing every interview and every speech." Laya was quiet, pushing rice around her plate. "Did I mess up?" she finally asked. "By standing up that day, did I make everything too complicated?" Angela's heart shattered. "Oh, baby, no. No, no, no." She moved around the table, pulled Laya into her lap, even though she was getting too big for it. "You didn't mess up. You did the most right thing anyone's ever done. You protected me. You stood up for what was right. And you started something that's genuinely changing the world." "Then why are you crying?" "Because I'm proud of you. Because I'm overwhelmed. Because sometimes doing the right thing is really, really hard." Angela kissed the top of Laya's head. "But we get to choose what happens next. And right now, I'm choosing us, our peace, our healing. Is that okay with you?" Laya nodded against her mother's chest. "Can we still help? Just maybe not all the time?" "Yes, we can help on our terms, when we're ready, when it doesn't hurt so much." They announced their decision the next week. A simple statement: Angela and Laya Morris would be stepping back from public-facing work with the James Morris Dignity Initiative to focus on family and healing. They would remain advisors, but would no longer do interviews or speaking engagements. The response was mixed. Supportive messages flooded in, people thanking them for their service, understanding their need for privacy, celebrating their courage and setting boundaries. But there were also accusations. Conspiracy theorists claiming they'd only done this for money and were now abandoning the cause. Trolls saying they were weak. Headlines asking if the initiative would survive without its most recognizable faces. Angela deleted her social media apps, stopped reading articles about herself, created a bubble of quiet where only Laya's voice and her own thoughts could reach her. And slowly, achingly slowly, she started to breathe again. 3 months into their sabbatical, something unexpected happened. Denise Crawford called. Angela almost didn't answer. She'd been doing so well keeping the world at arm's length, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Morris." Denise's voice was tentative. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "What do you need, Denise?" "I need to tell you something about the program." Angela's stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "No, actually, something's really right." Denise took a breath. "Remember how I've been working with veteran flight attendants, doing support groups for people struggling with burnout?" "Yes. We've had 43 attendants go through the program so far, and Angela, they're opening up about things they've never told anyone. Bias they've witnessed, discrimination they've participated in, their own breaking points." Her voice shook. 3 of them have already reported incidents they'd previously covered up. 2 supervisors are under investigation because these women finally felt safe enough to speak. Angela sat down slowly. "It's working," Denise interrupted. "The foundation is working. Not just the training, but the culture shift. People are starting to believe they'll be supported instead of punished for telling the truth. And Mrs. Morris," she paused, "that's because of you and Laya, because you showed us that accountability and compassion can coexist." Angela's eyes filled. "Thank you for telling me." "There's more." Denise's voice dropped. "Some of these women want to meet you, not for publicity or anything official, just to say thank you, to tell you their stories. Would that be something you'd consider?" Angela looked across the room where Laya was curled up reading, finally looking like a 9-year-old instead of a warrior. "Let me think about it," Angela said. She talked to Laya that night. "Some flight attendants want to meet us, to share their stories." Angela watched her daughter's face carefully. "But only if you're comfortable, no pressure." Laya closed her book. "Will there be cameras?" "No cameras, just conversation." "Will it help them?" "I think it might." Laya nodded slowly. "Then okay, but Mom, can we set some rules this time?" Angela smiled. "Like what?" "Like we only do it when we want to, and we get to say no if it's too much, and we don't apologize for taking care of ourselves." "When did you get so smart?" Laya grinned. "I learned from the best." 2 weeks later, they met with 6 flight attendants in a private conference room at Pacific Skyways headquarters. No press, no cameras, just 8 people and their stories. The first woman who spoke was named Patricia, 56, 32 years in the industry. I watched the video of what happened to you, Patricia said, looking at Angela, and I saw myself in Denise. Not the cruelty, but the exhaustion, the bitterness, the feeling that nobody cares how hard this job is. She wiped her eyes. I've said things I'm not proud of. Made assumptions about passengers based on how they looked. Stayed silent when I should have spoken up, and I thought that was just survival. But watching your daughter stand up for you, her voice broke. I realized survival isn't enough. We have to be better. The second woman, Maria, not the Maria from Flight 278, but another Maria, younger Latina, talked about the racism she'd faced from passengers and how it had made her hypersensitive sometimes. Seeing discrimination where there wasn't any, sometimes missing it where there was. The training taught me to pause, she said, to check my own reactions, to ask myself if I'm responding to what's actually happening or to my own pain. It's changed everything. One by one they shared, their struggles, their growth, their gratitude. And then the last woman spoke. Her name was Jennifer. 28, only 5 years in the industry, but already considering quitting. I was on a flight 3 weeks ago, Jennifer said quietly. There was a family, black father, white mother, biracial kids, and this passenger kept making comments. Loud enough for them to hear, but quiet enough to have deniability. You know the type. Angela nodded. She knew. Old me would have ignored it, Jennifer continued. Told myself it wasn't my business, that I couldn't control what passengers said to each other, but because of the training, I recognized what was happening. I saw the mother's face, the way she was shrinking, trying to make herself smaller, and I thought about you, Mrs. Morris, about how that could have been you. What did you do? Laya asked softly. Jennifer looked at her. I walked over and I said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, Sir, I need you to stop. Your comments are inappropriate and they're making other passengers uncomfortable. If you continue, you'll be removed from the flight. What did he do? He shut up. Jennifer smiled. And after we landed, the mother found me. She was crying. She said I was the first flight attendant who'd ever stood up for her family like that, that usually they're invisible, or worse, treated like they're the problem. Angela's throat was too tight to speak. I wanted you to know that, Jennifer said, because you're not here anymore. You stepped back, and that's good, you needed to, but the work didn't stop. The change didn't stop. It's spreading. Every day in little ways we're getting better, and that's because you and Laya had the courage to say this isn't acceptable. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, everyone was crying. As they were leaving, Patricia pulled Angela aside. I know you're tired, she said. I know this has cost you more than most people will ever understand. But I need you to know you gave us permission to be better. You gave us a roadmap, and we're following it. Angela hugged her. Thank you for telling me. In the car on the way home, Laya was quiet. You okay, baby? Angela asked. I'm good. And Laya looked out the window. I was just thinking about something Patricia said, about how we gave them permission to be better. What about it? I think that's what Dad would have wanted, not for us to fix everything ourselves, just to give people permission to do the work. Angela reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. You know what I think, you're exactly right. That night, Angela dreamed about James for the first time in months. They were at La Jolla Cove, the beach where he'd proposed. He was sitting on the sand, drawing something with a stick, while the waves rolled in. I'm proud of you, Angie, he said without looking up. I stepped back, Angela said. From the foundation, some people think I quit. Did you quit? No, I just needed to breathe. James finally looked up at her. His eyes were warm, alive, exactly as she remembered. Then you didn't quit. You just remembered that you can't pour from an empty cup. But there's so much left to do. And it'll get done. By you, by Laya, by people you've never met who were inspired by your courage. He stood, brushed sand from his jeans. Your job was never to fix everything, Angie. It was to start something. And baby, he smiled. You started something incredible. I miss you so much. I know, but you're doing it. You're living. You're raising our daughter to be brave and kind. You're changing the world. He touched her face. I'm so proud of you. Angela woke with tears on her cheeks and lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in months. The next morning she called David. I want to do something, she said. Not interviews or speeches. Something different. I'm listening. I want to create a scholarship for flight attendants' kids, specifically kids whose parents work in service industries and don't get recognition or support. Angela's voice strengthened. James always said the people who keep the world running are the ones who never get thanked. Let's thank them. Let's invest in their children's futures." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's perfect, Angela. That's exactly what James would have wanted." They launched the scholarship program 2 months later. Full rides to college for 50 students whose parents worked as flight attendants, baggage handlers, gate agents, cleaning crew, the invisible infrastructure of the airline industry. At the announcement event, small, intimate, just scholarship recipients and their families. Angela gave a speech without notes. "My husband believed that dignity isn't about where you sit on a plane," she said, her voice steady, only the slightest stutter. "It's about recognizing that every person matters, that the woman cleaning the bathrooms has just as much value as the CEO in first class, that the man loading your luggage deserves just as much respect as the pilot flying the plane." She looked at the 50 students sitting in the audience, young people from working-class families, first-generation college students, kids who'd grown up watching their parents sacrifice everything to keep planes in the air. "This scholarship is our way of saying we see you, we value you, your parents' work matters, and your dreams matter too." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a girl approached Angela, 16 shy, wearing her mother's flight attendant wings pinned to her shirt. "Mrs. Morris, I'm Sophie. My mom's been a flight attendant for 20 years. "Which airline?" "Pacific Skyways." Sophie's eyes filled. "She was working the day your husband's plane went down. She was one of the crew members who had to tell passengers there'd been an accident. She came home and cried for 3 days. Angela's breath caught. "She never forgot him," Sophie continued. "And when she heard what happened to you on Flight 278, she was so angry. She said that's not what James would have wanted. That's not what he built the airline to be." Sophie wiped her eyes. "This scholarship means I get to go to college, and my mom gets to see that her work mattered, that the sacrifices she made weren't for nothing. So thank you, from both of us." Angela pulled Sophie into a hug and let herself cry. That evening, Laya did something she hadn't done in months. She asked to watch the video. "Are you sure?" Angela asked. "I need to see it again, to remember." They sat together on the couch, Angela's laptop between them, and watched. Laya saw herself smaller than she remembered, scared but furious, launching between her mother and Denise. "Don't you dare touch my mom." When it ended, Laya was quiet for a long time. "I'm glad I did that," she finally said. "Me too, baby. But I'm also glad we stepped back, that we're not doing that anymore." Why? Laya thought carefully. "Because I think the bravest thing isn't always fighting. Sometimes it's knowing when to rest, when to let other people carry the weight." She looked up at her mother. "Dad's dream doesn't need us to destroy ourselves. It just needs us to keep believing in it." Angela pulled her daughter close, marveling at the wisdom in someone so young. "You know what?" Angela whispered. "I think you just taught me something your dad spent years trying to teach me." "What's that?" "That sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is take care of yourself." Laya smiled. "He told me that once, right before he died. He said, 'Laya, the world will always need heroes, but heroes need rest too.'" Angela's eyes filled. "He told you that?" "Yeah, I think he knew something was going to happen, like he was trying to prepare me." Laya's voice cracked. "I miss him, Mom." "I know, baby. Me too." They cried together the way they hadn't in months. Not sad tears exactly, more like release, like finally letting themselves feel the full weight of loss without the world watching, without cameras recording, without strangers dissecting their grief for content. Just a mother and daughter missing the man who'd loved them both, finding comfort in each other. Outside the sunset over their quiet neighborhood. Inside, Angela and Laya held each other and remembered James not as the founder of an airline or the inspiration for a movement, but as a husband and father who'd taught them that courage looks different for everyone. 1 year after Flight 278, Angela received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a drawing in crayon, a purple airplane flying through clouds shaped like hearts. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, "Thank you for teaching my mom to be brave. Love, Emma, age 7. Angela stared at it for a long time, then carefully pinned it to the refrigerator next to Laya's drawings of James. "Who's Emma?" Laya asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "I don't know," Angela said softly, "but her mom must have seen the video, must have been inspired by us." Laya moved closer, studying the drawing. "Do you think there are a lot of Emmas out there, kids whose parents changed because of what we did?" I hope so, baby. That same week, David called with news. The James Morris Dignity Initiative had been implemented across 32 airlines worldwide. Complaint rates for discrimination had dropped by 41% across participating carriers. Employee satisfaction scores were up. Passenger surveys showed measurably higher trust in airline staff. We did it, David said, his voice thick with emotion. Angela, Laya, you actually changed the industry. But the call Angela wasn't expecting came 3 days later. It was from a woman named Dr. Orr. Sarah Chen, a professor of social psychology at Stanford. Mrs. Morris, I've been studying your case, Dr. Chen said, specifically the ripple effects of viral activism. Would you and Laya be willing to participate in a research study? What kind of study? We're documenting how single viral moments create lasting systemic change. Your story is one of the most successful examples we've found, but we're also interested in the personal cost, the psychological impact on the individuals at the center of these movements. Angela's hand tightened on the phone. Why? Because the world celebrates viral heroes, but rarely asks what happens after the cameras leave, how they cope, what they sacrifice, whether the change was worth the cost. Dr. Chen paused. Your story could help future activists understand what they're getting into, and help organizations better support the people they ask to be the face of change. Angela looked across the room where Laya was doing homework, her tongue stuck out in concentration the way James's used to when he was thinking hard. Can I talk to my daughter first? Of course, take all the time you need. That night over dinner, homemade lasagna, one of James's recipes that Angela had finally been able to cook without crying, she broached the subject. Someone wants to study us, Angela said. Not for publicity, for research, to understand what viral activism does to the people involved. Laya set down her fork. Like lab rats. More like case studies. They'd interview us, track how we're doing, emotionally document what this year has been like. Would it help other people, people who go through what we went through? Dr. Chen thinks so. Laya was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. What do you think, Mom? Angela had been asking herself that question all afternoon. Part of her wanted to say no to keep their hard-won privacy intact. But another part, the part that sounded like James whispered that their story wasn't done teaching yet, I think we've spent a year learning how to rest, Angela said slowly. Maybe it's time to share what that rest taught us. Laya nodded. Okay, but only if we get to tell the truth. The whole truth, not just the pretty parts. Deal. The first interview with Dr. Chen happened in their living room 2 weeks later. No cameras, just a voice recorder, and 3 people talking honestly for the first time about what the past year had cost. Tell me about the panic attacks, Dr. Chen said gently. Angela had promised truth, so she gave it. The first one happened during a television interview. I was mid-sentence, and suddenly I couldn't breathe, couldn't remember where I was. The reporter thought I was having a stroke. She paused. They cut that part from the broadcast, made it seem like I was composed the whole time, but I wasn't. I was drowning. And you, Laya, what was the hardest part for you? Laya pulled her knees to her chest. Reading the comments. People saying I was too young to understand what I was doing, that my mom was exploiting me, that I'd regret it when I grew up. Her voice dropped. Sometimes I wondered if they were right. Do you still wonder? Sometimes, but then I remember that little girl on the plane, the one who was too scared to let her mom get hurt. And I think I don't regret protecting her. I don't regret making sure nobody ever makes my mom feel like that again. Dr. Chen interviewed them 6 more times over the next 3 months. Each session pulled something new to the surface, anger Angela hadn't known she was carrying, fear Laya had been hiding, grief they'd both been too busy to fully process. But the interviews also revealed something unexpected: healing. Talking about the trauma, naming it, analyzing it, it gave them distance from it. Made it something they'd survived rather than something that was still happening to them. During the 5th interview, Dr. Chen asked a question that stopped them both cold. If you could go back to that day on Flight 278 knowing everything that would happen after the viral video, the foundation, the scrutiny, the cost, would you still do it? Laya answered first. Yes, because if I didn't, Mom would have been hurt, and nothing is worth that. Angela's answer took longer. She thought about the panic attacks, the exhaustion, the way their lives had been turned inside out and displayed for millions to judge. She thought about the nights Laya had cried herself to sleep reading cruel comments, the therapy sessions they'd both needed, the relationships that had fractured under the pressure. But she also thought about Patricia, the flight attendant, learning to pause before judging, about Sophie getting to go to college because her mother's work finally mattered, About 17 airlines changing their policies. About Emma, age 7, drawing purple airplanes because her mom had learned to be brave. Yes, Angela said finally. I would do it again, not because it was easy, because it mattered. Dr. Chen smiled. That's what every successful activist I've interviewed has said. The ones who create real change aren't the ones who don't feel the cost. They're the ones who feel it completely and decide it's worth it anyway. Spring came. With it, an invitation that Angela almost declined. The International Aviation Safety Conference wanted her to give the keynote address. 5,000 people, airline executives, safety directors, policymakers from 60 countries. I can't, Angela told David immediately. I'm not doing public speaking anymore. I know, that's why I already told them no. Then why are you calling? Because they said if you won't speak, they want to give you an award. The James Morris Legacy Award for Aviation Excellence. First ever recipient. And Angela, his voice cracked, I think you should accept it. David, not for the recognition, for James. Let the world see that his dream didn't die with him. That his name still means something, that his girls carried it forward when he couldn't. Angela closed her eyes. Will Laya have to come? Only if she wants to. That night, Angela asked Laya what she thought. An award for Dad, Laya said slowly. That's different than an award for us. How so? Because Dad can't accept it himself, so we have to do it for him. Laya looked up at her mother. Don't we? They flew to the conference together, first class on Pacific Skyways. The flight attendant who greeted them was wearing the Dignity Initiative pin, and her eyes went wide when she saw their boarding passes. Mrs. Morris Laya, it's an honor. She crouched down to Laya's level. I went through the training because of you. It changed my life. What did it change? Laya asked. The flight attendant, her name tag read, Keisha thought for a moment. It taught me that every passenger has a story, that the woman who's rude might be grieving, that the man who's demanding might be scared, that kindness costs me nothing but might mean everything to them. She straightened up. So thank you for reminding us why we do this job. The flight was smooth. Laya colored while Angela read, both of them existing in the quiet comfort of routine. No panic attacks, no tears, just two people on a plane heading somewhere together. The conference center was overwhelming, massive, echoing, packed with people in suits and name badges. Angela's anxiety spiked the moment they walked in. We can leave, Laya whispered, grabbing her hand. No, we're here for Dad. We can do this. David met them at the entrance, looking more nervous than Angela had ever seen him. James should be here, he said quietly. He should be the one accepting this award. I know, Angela said, but he's not, so we'll do it for him. The ceremony was held in a ballroom that seated 5,000. Angela and Laya sat in the front row, surrounded by airline CEOs and government officials and people whose decisions affected millions of passengers every day. When their names were called, Angela's legs nearly gave out. Laya squeezed her hand. Together, Mom. They walked on stage together. The applause was deafening. The award itself was beautiful, a crystal airplane on a marble base, James's name etched in gold. But it was the inscription underneath that made Angela's throat close, for the man who taught us that the sky belongs to everyone. The conference chair handed Angela the microphone. She looked out at 5,000 faces, took a breath, thought about James. My husband died doing what he loved, she began, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Flying, building, dreaming of a world where everyone felt free in the sky. She paused. He didn't get to see that dream fully realized, but he planted the seeds, and after he died, those seeds kept growing. She looked down at Laya standing beside her. A year ago, my daughter and I boarded a flight. We were terrified, grieving, trying to honor James's memory by facing our fear. Her stutter came, but she pushed through. What happened on that flight shouldn't have happened, but it did, and in the moment when hate tried to silence us, my 9-year-old daughter stood up and said no. The room was absolutely still. This award isn't for us, Angela continued. It's for James, for the vision he had, for the airline he built with compassion at its core, for the belief that every person, regardless of how they look, how they speak, where they sit, deserves dignity. Her voice strengthened. But it's also for every flight attendant who's relearned how to see passengers as people. Every airline that's chosen change over comfort. Every passenger who's experienced kindness instead of judgment. You're the ones living James's dream. You're the ones proving that change is possible. She held up the award, the crystal catching the lights. James used to say that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Angela's eyes filled. So to everyone in this room, be afraid. Feel the discomfort of change. Acknowledge how hard this work is. And then do it anyway, because that's what courage looks like. That's what James would have wanted. And that's what the millions of people who fly every day deserve. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Afterward, dozens of people approached them. A pilot from Singapore Airlines who'd implemented the training across his entire fleet. A gate agent from Kenya who'd used the de-escalation techniques to prevent 3 potential conflicts in the past month. A CEO from a budget carrier who admitted his airline had the worst discrimination record in the industry but was committed to changing it. Each person had a story. Each story mattered. But the conversation that hit hardest came from an elderly woman who'd been sitting in the back. She approached slowly, leaning on a cane. When she reached Angela and Laya, tears were streaming down her face. "Mrs. Morris, I'm Catherine." Her voice shook. "I was a flight attendant for 40 years, retired now, but I need to tell you something." "Of course." Catherine looked at Laya. 50 years ago, I was you. I was a little black girl whose mother was treated terribly on an airplane. The flight attendant called her names, made her move to a worse seat, humiliated her in front of everyone." She wiped her eyes. "And I sat there. I didn't stand up. I didn't protect her. I was too scared." Laya's hand found Angela's. "I've carried that shame my whole life," Catherine continued. "It's why I became a flight attendant, to make sure no other child watched their mother be degraded like that. But I always wondered if I'd been braver that day, if I'd stood up like you did, maybe things would have changed sooner." She reached out, touched Laya's cheek. "You did what I couldn't, and because of you, thousands of children won't have to watch their parents suffer. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough for all of us." Laya threw her arms around Catherine and they both sobbed. Angela watched her heart simultaneously breaking and healing, understanding for the first time the full scope of what they'd done. This wasn't just about one flight, one viral video, one foundation. This was about 50 years of Catherine's who'd carried shame they shouldn't have had to carry. About Emma's learning bravery from their mothers. About a chain of pain being broken by one 9-year-old girl who loved her mother more than she feared the consequences. That night back in their hotel room, Laya couldn't sleep. "Mom," she called from her bed. "Yeah, baby. Do you think we're done now? Like, is this the end of the story?" Angela got up, climbed into bed beside her daughter the way she used to when Laya was small. "I don't know if stories like ours ever really end," Angela said softly. "I think they just become part of something bigger, part of how the world changes." "But what about us? What do we do now?" Angela thought about Dr. Chen's research, about Catherine's tears, about 17 airlines and 41% fewer complaints, and 50 scholarship recipients, and a little girl named Emma drawing purple airplanes. "Now we live," Angela said. "We go home. You finish 4th grade. I go back to work. We visit Dad's grave and we tell him about all of this. We have good days and bad days. We heal a little more each month. We let other people carry the foundation forward while we figure out who we are beyond this story. And if someone needs us again, if something happens and we could help, then we'll decide together, like we always do." Angela kissed Laya's forehead. "But we get to have boundaries now. We get to say no. We get to choose rest over heroism sometimes, and that's okay." Laya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mom, I'm glad I stood up that day, but I'm also glad we get to sit down now." Angela's laugh was half sob. "Me too, baby. Me too." They fell asleep tangled together, 2 people who'd survived something extraordinary and were learning to be ordinary again. 3 months later, Angela and Laya stood on La Jolla Cove, the same beach where James had proposed, where Angela had dreamed of bringing Laya after they finally faced the fear of flying. They'd brought flowers, purple ones, Laya's favorite, and James's ashes, which had been sitting in an urn on Angela's dresser for 3 years because she hadn't been ready to let go. "You sure about this, Inni?" Angela asked. Laya nodded. "Dad shouldn't be stuck in our house. He loved the ocean. He should be part of it." They walked to the water's edge. The waves rolled in gently, like the ocean knew this was sacred. Angela opened the urn with shaking hands. Laya held the flowers. "James." Angela said, her voice steady for once, no stutter. "We did it. We faced the fear. We flew. We honored your dream. We changed the world a little bit." Tears streamed down her face. "And now we're letting you go, not forgetting you, never forgetting you, but letting you be free." Laya stepped forward. "Dad, I kept my promise. I took care of Mom, and I think you'd be proud of us." They scattered the ashes together, mother and daughter releasing James into the water he'd loved. The flowers followed, floating on the waves like tiny purple boats. For a long time, they just stood there, watching the ocean carry James away and toward everywhere all at once. "Do you think he's proud of us?" Laya asked. Angela pulled her daughter close. "Baby, I know he is." As they turned to leave, Laya picked up a shell from the sand, white and perfect, just like the one she'd found a year ago. "For our collection," she said, tucking it in her pocket. "Our collection of reminders that we survived, that we're still here, that love is stronger than hate." Angela looked at her daughter, 10 years old now, tall for her age, still wearing that purple hoodie despite Angela buying her 3 new ones, still wise beyond her years, but finally allowed to just be a kid again. "You know what?" Angela said. "I think we should come back here, once a year, bring flowers, collect shells, tell Dad what we did that year. Like a tradition. Exactly like a tradition." Laya smiled. "Dad would like that." They walked back to the car hand in hand, leaving footprints in the sand that the waves would eventually erase. But that was okay. Some things weren't meant to last forever. Some things like viral videos and news cycles and public attention faded, but other things like courage, dignity, and the love between a mother and daughter who'd survived the impossible, those things were eternal. 6 months after the beach, Angela got one final call about the foundation. It was from the United Nations. They wanted to expand the James Morris Dignity Initiative beyond airlines. Into trains, buses, hospitals, schools, anywhere humans interacted with systems that could either honor or degrade them. "We're calling it the Morris Protocol," the representative said, "a global standard for dignity in public service, and we'd like your permission to use James's name." Angela didn't hesitate. "Yes, but on one condition." "What's that?" "Laya and I get to stay out of the spotlight. Our part of this story is done. It's time for others to carry it forward." There was a pause. Then, "Mrs. Morris, that's exactly the kind of wisdom we need more of. Knowing when to step back is just as important as knowing when to step up." After she hung up, Angela found Laya in the backyard. She was drawing purple airplanes like always, but this time they were flying through rainbow clouds. "That's beautiful," Angela said. "It's for the foundation," Laya explained. "I thought they could use it, for the logo or something." Angela looked closer. In the cockpit of the largest plane, there was a tiny figure with a halo. "Is that Dad?" Laya nodded. "He's still flying, just in a different way now." Angela sat beside her daughter in the grass, watching her color, feeling the sun warm on her face and the weight of the past year finally truly lifting. "You know what I think," Angela said. I think dignity isn't something you earn. It's something you're born with, and our job, yours, mine. The foundation's, everyone's, is just to remember that, and to remind others when they forget." Laya looked up at her mother and smiled. "Dad used to say that." "I know, and he was right." They sat together in the quiet afternoon, a mother and daughter who'd been broken by loss, thrust into the spotlight by courage, and were now finally learning to live again. The video of Flight 278 had been viewed over 100 million times. The hashtag Justice for Angela had trended for weeks. Laya's face had been on the cover of magazines. But that wasn't the story they'd remember. They'd remember the moment Laya stood up. They'd remember choosing rest over recognition. They'd remember Catherine crying, and Sophie's scholarship, and Keisha saying kindness costs nothing. They'd remember that James's dream hadn't died with him. And they'd remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect the person you love, even if the whole world is watching. Especially if the whole world is watching. Because dignity isn't about who's watching. It's about who you are when no one is. And Angela and Laya, they'd learned to be exactly who they were meant to be. James's girls. Survivors, activists, heroes. But most importantly, themselves.